We are. Carries. Without further ado, good evening and welcome to this meeting of the Housing and Community Select Committee. I am Councillor Claire Simmons, Chair of the committee, and I will be chairing tonight's meeting. The event is being streamed live on YouTube, and members of the public and media are welcome to watch the meeting remotely and listen to the discussions taking place. And now I would like to welcome all of those in Committee Room 1 at Kensington Town Hall and everyone watching on YouTube. Before we proceed with the meeting, I would ask members of the committee to please make sure your mobile phones are on silent or switched off. And we will start with 72 seconds of silence to remember those who lost their lives in the Grenfell tragedy. Thank you. So let's begin with the agenda. Apologies for absence. We have apologies received from Councillor Hamish and Item 2, declarations of interest. Does any member have an interest to share? Yeah, right, fine. Right. Okay. So I need to ask members to declare any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest in relation to charities or local organisations that could be affected by the consultation outcome of item 5.
Okay, so I'm a trustee of the Westway Trust. That probably doesn't count, but the Earls Court Youth Club, I'm a trustee, and I'm a trustee of the Forum for Older Residents. And so the Youth Club and the Forum will come into it.
Thank you.
I work for the Somali Development Organization, small charity, and you don't get money, but we are thinking in the future to apply.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm a trustee of ESSA, which is a small local-based charity here in W8, and I don't believe it's directly affected in this, but it could do in the future.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wade.
Trustee of Brighton Kensington Chelsea.
Thank you. That's all. Yes. Thank you. We will then move to the minutes of the meeting held on the 8th of December 2025. The action tracker and the minutes of previous meetings have been circulated. Does the committee agree to sign them as a correct record?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you. And I would like to apologise that the lead member for housing, Councillor Soft McVeigh, was accidentally missed off the attendance record of the minutes of the meeting of the 16th of September 2025. As those minutes were signed as a correct record at the previous meeting, this error will be noted in the minutes for this meeting.
Thanks, Kat.
Thanks, Chad. I've got to sign these now. Yes. So we will now move on to agenda item 4, which is the New Homes Programme Lessons Learned Report. This report summarises key lessons learned from the New Homes Programme across the full project life cycle, from inception to delivery, handover and in use. Councillor Software will present this report alongside Dan Hawthorne, Christine Addison and Stacey.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just before we get into this report, I just want to acknowledge that it's Dan Wilkins' last scrutiny meeting tonight. I just want to thank him for guiding us through so many reports in front of you that have come to your committee. Sorry, we've had quite a few last meetings recently, but and just to publicly say to thank him for all his work and his calm head and his brains on so many of our policies and reports.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sol. And thank you, Dan.
Thank you. Yes. It's been a pleasure working.
So now to the paper. I think it's a very clear paper, and there's something which one of the officers is going to say about one of our tables. And do you want to mention about
It's I might ask Christine.
Christine's going to say that.
Yeah.
And thank you all very much, committee, for visiting the New Homes. That is really appreciated that you've gone and taken the time to do that. So thank you. Very happy to go just straight into questions, I think.
Is it possible that I just do a correction at the
Yes,
start?
certainly, yes,
Because what we
absolutely.
spotted, unfortunately, after the paper went out, it only affects one line. It doesn't
Okay.
affect anything else or any of your other thoughts. Is that on page 22, it's 7.3, the table with budget figures in. The Lots Road budget looks very low compared to the spend. The forecast spend looks much lower than the budget. The reason for it is that accidentally the wrong figure was put in. That's the spend to the end of this financial year, but we are expecting that to be within the £15 million programme budget that we've got for it. So apologies for that. That was just an error that we didn't spot before we sent the paper out.
Thank you for clarifying that. So I'm going to turn to the committee, Councillor Wade.
I think it's interesting saying that it's a learning curve and that lessons have been learned. But I think that what I would have liked to have seen was how the department was going to respond. You've acknowledged the problems, but what is the kind of the framework? Who's responsible for what? What is the training? You don't appear to have had contingency planning or professional consultants incorporated. I think that if you're going to put a budget together and submit it for approval, it should be robust enough, because otherwise it looks like you're approximately £2 million over on every single project. So I think that if you're going to learn anything, is what is the structure, what are the roles, what are the responsibilities, and what is in fact your internal mechanism to actually double check, because you had a problem with some contractors that cost quite a lot. So,
Thank you, Councillor. I think Christine,
Yeah.
you want to answer that?
I think, yeah, Chair, it's okay, but you're happy for me to pick up. So I think we've come a long way from the start. So, and the paper sets out, this programme was started, after the Grenfell tragedy. I think that we were moving as fast as we could to get something off the ground. And so, since the start, I don't think we've learned nothing. I think that we've gone through and we've learned the lessons as we've gone along. But if you go back to the origins of it, it was actually, let's get these sites going, let's get into contract, let's move as fast as we can to deliver these programmes over a period of time. But actually, all of the lessons learned that you've got in here, they are a reflection of the learning that has happened since this programme. And I've been here since mid-2023. Stacey here, who's the acting head of capital delivery, she has been here for over 2 years. In that period, Chair, I think this might feel like a repeat of last night's conversations and told it in transparency, but in that period, we have significantly improved both program management and project management across the board. So we have picked up lessons learned. We've done quite a lot of preparation planning. We have a program management office approach whereby we've got each project at the right phase, and we don't let it go to the next phase until we're ready. But we started with what we had, and so and in terms of team capability, the New Homes programme actually was always run under a programme management, programme board approach. So it was like that, but actually what we've built is a lot of expertise over that time. And then the contingency bit in use of consultants, I absolutely think that we've learned that, and we have used and managed consultants much better.
Sorry, when you say that the report reflects your learning, how have you embedded this learning in how you work every day?
Can I just slightly jump in here as well, because I think what Christine has laid out is the initial ones that we started on. We've definitely learned from them, but also if you just look at the table on page 20, the huge variety in the different types of projects, because as we all know, we only have a very small amount of land that we as a council can actually build on. And our largest one is on site at Barby Road, which thank you visited. And I think, I'm not just touching it, I think it is going very well. And so I would like to actually say that we have incorporated a lot of lessons that we have learned, even though the scale of the previous ones have been quite different to this one.
But you would acknowledge that approximately £2 million overspent is on a number of projects at a time when we're being asked to cut services that we can't replicate this pattern.
Absolutely, Councillor Wade, completely agree. And unfortunately, a lot of these were started when the building environment was very different, before high inflation costs, before building costs after the Russian invasion of Ukraine. So the figures there are probably very different from what actually was going to happen on site.
If I just come in on that point, it's really important one. And if you look at the later projects, if you look at Barby project, actually that's spending under. So I think having learned the lessons from the others, we built in what we needed to build in from the start. And actually, in a way, we've managed it so much tighter that we're not even spending the budget that was originally anticipated for it. So I mean, I do think it's been a long time with a lot of factors getting in the way as we've gone forward, but I actually think we've learned a lot of those lessons.
I mean, when you look at, just 1 second, when you look at point at 8.4 on page 22, the council has mentioned, that's actually quite a considerable percentage that we're talking about in terms of contingency and professional fees. So when you consider that we have these overspends per project, in conjunction with all of the external factors that have been listed in the paper and that Sof has just mentioned, actually, you could say it's quite impressive that it's not worse.
I think that's right. And then using that 40% figure in the report, it's a generic kind of risk approach to any project. So you put 20% for fees, you'd put a 20% contingency because there are things that you don't know. So what we were trying to do is apply that backwards. If you'd said that at the start, added all of that in, actually we would have started with a much bigger budget, so we probably would have underspent. And you can see that having, I'm not saying got it completely right, I'm sure there are things that we'll learn along the way with Barby as well, but actually having built that into the Barby project that's on that you visit on site now, actually I think it's exactly what you're saying, is if you do work through the risks before you go to the next stage, which is what you would expect to do, then you are able to manage within a budget. Yes. So that 40% actually, we didn't need it all, and it's not quite a miracle, but I think there has been, despite the projects going over, and we're all disappointed when something goes wrong and it costs us more. And we found something that we perhaps should have known about before, could have done ground checks, could have done third party and stuff earlier just to box everything off. And they all cost us money. But having said that, we've absorbed all of those costs and the increase isn't as high as it could have been had we really kind of got it wrong in the first place. So I think actually there was some demonstration of good project management, but actually perhaps rushing and then external factors getting in the way as well. So it isn't just that we've improved over the last 2 years, but we've certainly learned from that early experience.
Thank you. I did see Councillor Rossi.
Yeah, just to be more specific, looking at Hewitt Street and Kelso, which were Cochrane, which were early ones. And I think in Hewitt Street, I also think really in Kelso as well, people had to move out. There seems to, when you've got it up and running, you've got your new build and all the rest of it, and then people move in and something's not quite right and they have to sort of move out again. So a lot seem to centre to me around the new heating and hot water system. So could we not have explained it to people a bit more clearly, or taught people how they would have to maintain it and look after it so that this situation wouldn't arise?
I think the answer to that is absolutely yes. And Stacey is the person that we have to give the credit, working with housing management to make sure that we managed the things that went wrong, how we put them right, and how we make sure that they don't go wrong again after handover. And it is spot on. Actually, you're picking out the hot water and heating systems. They were complicated, high quality, actually high cost systems that are hard for us to maintain and hard for tenants to understand.
New technology as well.
And that is hard for people when they're not used to it.
Yeah.
And so on that,
I was just going to say, if I may come in, I think I did address on the site visit. So one thing we've done really well with housing right now is we've got companies who come in and to be able to do personalised home demonstrations, as you say, to learn the lessons and make sure that they feel comfortable and assured they know how to use the equipment. And the key thing to draw on is our net target in terms of carbon net zero. So the reason for kind of moving away from gas is to make things more efficient, economically better for the resident. And in conjunction with, like I said, the personalised demonstrations, and we also give QR codes for people who are able to use their mobile devices to kind of have videos come up. And if there are any queries, we do still work quite closely with the coordinators, the service coordinators and the housing teams, if there are any further queries that do get arisen, that do arise from the residents, they're still unsure.
Of the filters that we saw.
Yes.
Presented.
No, it's not the filters that's the issue. It's just part of, to ensure that the air efficiency and quality is there, we need to ensure that the filters are clean and are changed on a regular basis. But I wouldn't say that that's an issue with the system.
So Councillor, can I just jump in here to say that I think Stacey has explained very clearly that we have learnt lessons, particularly from Kelso and Hewitt Street, where we didn't do that. And as you see from the table, we handed over those in March, their handover was in November or September 2023. And then Atkin, which happened a year later, there have been no issues like that at all. And so Stacey's done a fantastic job working with housing management. Also, on one of the earlier ones, housing management probably took over too early. Yeah. And so we've learned that. We've got a much better kind of joint working between the two teams now to make sure that we don't, as a housing management team, we don't take on board something when the project team is still kind of working through various issues there. So that's much better. So I like that we have moved on from this.
The filters, because we actually saw
Yes.
and I just queried whether or not it was the filters that potentially could have caused the problem in Kelso Clock.
No, it wasn't.
It was something separate,
Yes, that is
but it was
correct.
related to that type of equipment.
No, the mechanical ventilation systems itself is not the issue. I think it's just the maintenance side, which is what I'm kind of picking up on to ensure that residents have the awareness and knowledge of what's required. So, as I think the clerk of works demonstrated to you when she took the filter out, you need to hoover it on a monthly basis to make sure that it's clean and obviously the air remains at its prime.
So I think that Councillor Wade is asking, was that issue the same issue at Hewitt Street, Kelso Clock?
No,
No,
completely different systems.
It's completely different systems, yeah.
And we
Just
have
the
learned
residents.
that Acton is a similar system
yeah, so
to
the
Kelso, and we have
similarity-
learned from it.
So the similarity
Yeah.
is in not always making sure that when residents move in,
Yes.
they are fully informed about how to maintain
To
the
utilise
system
the
and use the system.
Exactly, yeah. And like I said, we've got the demonstrations in place now.
Yeah.
And obviously
And QR
manuals as
codes
well,
and QR
manuals.
codes to assist in that, and that's in the report. Thank you.
Yes.
Councillor Gardner, you had your hand up.
Thank you. I say thank you very much, Stacey, for showing us around. And I certainly found it fascinating to see the progress from the hole in the ground involved to actually looking around flats being fitted out. I have a couple of questions and they're all over to this. So, firstly, the pressure of the GLA deadlines and the element that we push. And there's an element of naivety that we didn't put in 50%. I don't really get it. But to what extent have we now got either the mettle or the stamina to push back at the GLA realistically and say, actually, this isn't going to happen in those timeframes? Because I can tell you that when I remember KAA being built and the leisure centre, the whole focus was on KAA initially because that had a deadline that it had to be opened by the academic year. And so I'm kind of looking at this going, we're in that same holding pattern, and how do we get out of it, or how do we have those serious conversations where you actually say, you know what, on this size of project, we need, and I don't think we wish to forego the grants, but we do need to actually realistically set on.
I think it's a really good point because the way that the grants work is that they're on a cycle. So you apply for a series of grants in a tranche that have to be spent by a certain day. So I think there's an element of pushback that you could make. In other parts of the country, they swap it around so you can get through it, but in London, that works in the same way. But if you were to, we also need to take responsibility for applying for the grant at the right level and at the right time. And one of the issues with this programme and why it's cost us a lot and it's sometimes been hard for them to be viable is the grant that was on offer at that point in time was 100,000 a unit. And actually the grant levels that are being agreed now are anything upwards of 180, upwards and up to 300,000 for schemes across London, and we're having conversations along those lines around some of our schemes. So the reality of it is that we would have all grabbed for it because we said we would have built it by then, but actually if we had paced the programme in the way that it's actually transpired time-wise, we might have applied for different tranches of grant at different levels later. So I think we've got our own lessons to learn from that. And I think there is a conversation with the GLA about the flexibility around grants, because elsewhere, if we couldn't spend ours, another could, and so you would swap around. And I think there's a bit less flexibility because London is not as small as national for that to happen, and not as large as national for that to happen. And I'm not sure it does. So we get the punishment if we're not on site by a particular day. So it's exactly the same, but we're not. It's not in our hands. And that is a bit of an issue. It's a very good point.
So when you say there's a conversation to be had with GLA, presumably that would apply to all London councils.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that being the case, I wonder if that conversation is being had by, say, London councils.
Yeah, where I'm at now is the co-chair of the kind of group of London housing directors, and we talk very often to the GLA about exactly that kind of. And in fairness to the GLA, they, particularly in the current political environment, are very highly incentivised to make maximum use of their grant. It's actually helping things to happen. And they are also because they are, as Christine's alluded to, there's a different regime in London to the rest of the country. And in London, the grant is passed to them by government for them to distribute in London. And some of those hard deadlines about which contain the programmes between two bookends are imposed on the GLA by government. So they have limited discretion to that flexibility. But as Christine says, the trick is in moving schemes kind of between the different discrete programmes over different periods of time, so that the GLA can be sure, as it were, that they're not having to hand back money to government because it can't get spent at all, whilst maintaining the maximum possible support for schemes that can deliver. And so I think the kind of there's creativity for them to show in how that be done, but also, as Christine said, it relies on discipline and clarity from the bidding boroughs and the bidding housing associations, because these are bids which housing associations that are make too, to be really clear about when they're going to be able to deliver. And I think there's something about and again, this wasn't unique to us. at the point where where this new wave of council house building was starting, those are muscles that had wasted over 40 years in local authorities, and there was a bit of naivety and lack of expertise in this council, as in lots of others, about what was livable by when. And so every council, including us, has learned those lessons and is now probably better at it than they were when they started out.
Can I just pick up what you say? So in here you talk about tenure blind, and you also say that GLA grants weren't available on mixed tenure blocks. So again, we seem to have pushed up the costs. Could you also talk about the fact that tenure blind actually means financially, and also you talk about the council's enhanced specifications. So for me, I look at value for money and a good finish, but I don't look for a Rolls Royce finish. And I do wonder to what extent some of these enhanced specifications have pushed us into that area, and to what extent we can push back.
It is a really good question, and I think there is something around tenure blind and standards that we have operated to. Essentially, we developed quite high design standards, as you'll have seen from the schemes that we've got in the first place. So it's been very design led. All of that was consulted on at the time, so it's quite hard to look back from actually. So we were implementing what we were consulting on. The tenure blind bit, and the reason why it affects money, is that the standard that we would expect for ourselves and our social tenants is exactly the same that we would employ for the affordable rent and the market rent. So theoretically, even if the grant's been given for whichever one it is, you could actually put a social tenant into that unit and a private tenant into that unit, and they would effectively have exactly the same product. But what that meant, because the standards that we had set for our social housing were well above what a developer might do in the private sector housing. We've talked about that before in terms of the cost per unit when we were here last July. You know, our standards are so much higher, our cost per unit will be so much higher, just alongside other things, that it's actually driven the cost of all of it up, because we might have had, if I have a way of saying it, it's like cheaper units, if you like, for the private sector. The key about the standards and the tenure blind and how we've moved forward, and I think Barbie might demonstrate this a little bit, but Stacey can jump in if I've got this a little bit wrong, is that where we've moved over time is to focus the high standard where it really needs to be, which is around resident safety, construction safety, resident safety, where we've kind of compromised because realistically we can't keep spending at such a high level. And I think and the question is asked, is there anywhere where, there are some things when you go around them, you think, did you really need one of those? You might be asking yourselves that. And actually that is what we have done. So just as an example, on the schemes, the earlier schemes, we've got quite high quality kitchens, tiling, all the white goods included. For housing management to then take those on, every time something goes wrong, they've got a bespoke thing to replace or a repair. So what we've built into the later schemes, Barbie is included, is to get the standard to where housing management have it, and decency standard around some of the finishes that won't have an impact on, obviously, on tenant safety or the planning standards and the quality design standards that we adopted at the start. I think there are other areas we could have kind of saved money, if you like, and not affected any safety or even what looks like quality.
Thank you for that very clear explanation. But we've just got to kind of cast our minds back. We, other council, were grateful happened. This was completely and utterly the right thing to do, to focus on incredibly high quality, incredibly high standards for our social housing tenants. This is the first new council homes built in a generation in Kensington and Chelsea. So while we can look at it now and say, okay, we may make some changes further, I completely stand by this decision. It wasn't my decision, I completely stand by this decision that we did it like this, and we did tenure blind. Tenure blind is absolutely essential. I know that Kim, my predecessor, was absolutely adamant, I think rightly so, that all these blocks should be tenure blind. So whilst hindsight is a wonderful thing, and we can say, okay, maybe not, there's a Nusi oven or whatever here, there, and a fridge here and there, but in principle, I completely stand by these decisions.
Thank you, Sol, and I can understand that. I think just to be very clear, when we're talking about tenure blind, we're not just talking about externally
which obviously had some headlines
Yeah.
a while ago,
Yeah.
a few years ago. We're actually talking internally as well. And I take your points somewhere what you said. Charlie, do you have anything more?
Yeah, I have two more questions, if you don't mind. One is, it's very good that you've got stability within the team. It is actually, there's an element of not repeating it when you choose to have careers elsewhere. Dan, unfortunately, is leaving us tonight, and much big rather he stayed. How do we ensure that these things that you've put in place and the knowledge that you've built up does not walk out the door with it?
Yeah, so yeah, really good question. And and so some of it is systemic, so and I think it is about making sure that one, we've learned lessons, two, we've got good records. We are sharing information. We don't just have the information within our office, we share it across with housing as well, so that we all know everything that's happening with projects at the same time. So our record keeping, if you like, but also you will get turnover in this area. It's quite you can go anywhere if you've got the project management skills to deliver well, and so you will lose people. We have in the past relied more on consultants and working with us, so temporary staff. We're moving away from that to try to get permanent staff who commit and stay longer. So I think that's one element, and the other one is just making sure that the standard and the quality of the staff and the qualifications of the staff as they come in is high enough so that they know exactly how to manage a project, report on a project, and spot risk and escalate it. So, for example, when in our requirements now, we want Association of Project Management qualification to be able to deliver our capital delivery projects, because if you don't have that, you've got somebody coming in who might have done a project, but actually the discipline isn't going to be there in the same way. So we're building it into our recruitment. We recently restructured, and so where we are advertising posts, that's exactly what we're bringing in, trying to get those skills from elsewhere and attract people into this borough, which is an exciting place to work. So we do attract people just for that reason.
Lloyd.
Do you have one more question? Sorry, you said.
There was another one.
So the first thing to recognise is whoever the occupants and tenants are going to be are going to have a very good standard of living. And I think we should all be collectively proud of that. And it was the right decision to make. And Dan leaves us with that legacy, I might say. Like Councillor Gardner said, I joined some of those sites when there were holes in the ground, and to see them come on in such a way, and to think ahead. When you look out the window and you see the plans for the planted podiums and the attention to detail and the winter gardens and things like that, that's a whole new standard of living for social homes. So I think that is the biggest standout for me. There were a couple of questions on the delivery though. When it comes to common areas, which are great, I noticed that Acklam House still haven't handed over the ground floor areas. Is there good news on the horizon?
Acklam, just to jump in, but Acklam, it's kind of split. So Acklam, the community areas have been handed over to Swinbrook Estate, but gone.
Sorry, just to clarify, you about the ground floor units and
yes, the two. One was
Almanar and
Yeah, I saw that.
No, I just saw them empty.
Yeah, and it's not the only place where that's happened. It happened on a couple of other sites too. It's so there is certainly good news coming, and it's been frustrating that we haven't managed to time it such that it was ready to go. To a certain extent, that was inevitable because some of the kind of detailed work to finalise that arrangement with Almanar relied on Almanar being able to get access to the space in order to kind of assess it for their needs. Of course, that couldn't be done until we had possession of the building. But we're now moving forward very close to being able to kind of agree the lease with them and get that moving. So we're close to it. But I absolutely recognise that, particularly because it's always the ground floor and therefore the bit that's most visible to the local community, that there's an imperative to try and minimise that period for the local community and actually for the people who live there who have this kind of slight odd experience of living above a vacant space. So it's there are lessons to learn there, but there's something about the pace at which commercial property moves compared to how quickly we can move to some of the residential residency where it's a bit of a mismatch. But I think each situation is unique. There's one across the Cochrane as well, wasn't there, with the rocket there. But we can certainly we can certainly sit here now and give you a strong assurance, as it were, this is not a long-term empty lot problem. It's just that it's more just us not being able to quite line up the occupation of the residential with the non-residential.
So weeks, months away.
I think realistically, Acklam Road, it is months, but with visible progress soon. See what I mean? Because there'll be some fit out work to do. Because at the moment, it's just a shell, so we should be able to agree terms of that arrangement within weeks, and then the fit out works will take place over the course of the rest of the course.
And my other question is about when we come to the handover, because I looked at Silchester Arches and there's been a slight delay on that one, probably more for our own planning department and the problems and the delays we've got there than anything else. But there's nothing more frustrating when you build these lovely homes and you want people to move into them, and lots of people reaching to move into them. And I certainly know in the private sector it's a big pullback because you've got to get in safety inspectors now, fire inspectors now. So do we expect, I know that we've already had a delay on Mulberry that will be later this year. I bet those people love to be in before Christmas. Are we expecting any delays on that further with the safety inspections or the final inspections for habitation?
No. So I think what I said to you on site when you guys came last week, everything should be completed by September. So they will definitely be in before Christmas.
Fine.
Did you want to finish your questions?
It was actually more of something, so Stacey when she was showing us around, showing us a number of the accessible units, which I thought were quite inspiring with both the units that go up and down and the opening front doors. What I was concerned about in one of the conversations was that the bathroom had been fitted out and then subsequently the tenant in exchange for the workroom. And you're kind of going, that's sort of very bad planning and costs. And so it's actually, how can we not be ripping out a brand new bathroom to replace with a wet room?
It's a good one, and I think with that one, and I know which one you mean. It's because once allocated, the occupational therapist comes in for that tenant, and then we have to make some changes. And I guess the issue is the extent to which you're able to kind of pre-let during build, and that is, and on that particular one, it was created as an accessible unit, but the particular needs, the particular tenant meant that we had to, with housing management and with the occupational purpose, we had to make changes. So I'm not sure how far you can always avoid that actually, but because you have to get it right for the individual, everything is done to a standard. Stacey might want to take over on part.
Yeah, I think that's what I addressed with you on site. So in terms of general regulation, part M is for all our wheelchair accessible units, is what the regulation is for the units. But I think the lesson learned that you're probably trying to draw out is that working with our occupational therapists now, all of the accessible units there is, because I think the waiting list is quite high, and what I understand, we are moving to ensuring that all of them will have wet rooms. And as Christine's advised, that considering that person's individual need, if there's anything additional over and above, that will be done through that particular assessment. So in terms of the baseline standard of what you're kind of referencing in terms of the cost impact, I think that's something that we've kind of picked up on and learned from, so shouldn't be an issue in the future. But as you saw, they are all wet rooms. Yeah.
So can I just double check and confirm that all accessible facilities will have wet rooms? I think that makes a lot more sense, and especially also where we have aging populations.
Yes.
And I know we have a lot of people that would love an adaptation to make their bathroom a wet room. The red will look like. Not great. That's the weight.
When you said you restructured the department, is it possible to have some insight? Because if you look at you've got some incompleted projects, you've got a couple of others, but will the skill sets be able to be applied to actually doing some of the upgrades and the rest of the council stock? And will they only be coming in because they have project management on build, or rather than will they have developing a skill set that's transferable to be able to upgrade some of the existing council stock?
Two.
Quite separate.
Yeah, they're-
Unless Dan wants to come in here, because
Dan
there's
might want
they're
to.
two quite separate.
They are.
No, I mean, it's an interesting question, because in other councils, my understanding is that sometimes the new home programme actually sits under
Yes, that's
the
right.
housing management team. So you're kind of, you're picking up something that
Yeah,
has
there
been
are certainly different ways
discussed.
of organising it. It is a slightly different set of skills to manage the construction of new homes compared to the
But you're still
major
going
works
to
on the
set
existing
aims
stock.
and objectives.
Yeah, and
It's carbon neutral.
what I would say is that we're it's obviously one of the reasons why deliberately, because in some councils, going back to the kind of point about different people do it in different ways, the property team will be in a completely different part of the council to the housing team. One of the reasons that this is all deliberately put together under one directorate is to maximise the extent to which this is kind of one community of practice. Even if it's not the same people, you've got people working in the same department and collaborating and sharing expertise, and that certainly does happen. The fact is that because of the particular point this council is at in its investment in existing stock, where we inherited in 2017 a situation where no major work had been done for a very long time, we've had to build in proportion to the stock we've got. We've had to build a pretty muscular team in housing management to manage just that major works on the existing stock. And I think there would have been a risk probably that we wouldn't have had enough kind of we needed to have a team focused on that and a team focused on this, each one of which was a huge priority, and to cross the streams. Not only I think is it slightly different sets of skills, but both were such a high priority that they needed their own dedicated teams. But the principle that they are working in similar areas with strong areas of overlap is absolutely the right one. And we do everything we can within the department to ensure that these people are kind of comparing notes and kind of working closely and learning from each other.
Another question,
Yes.
a general question. The projects which are paused, Latimer Church, Eden Way. And I mean, I'm just going to ask this question whether you can answer it or not, but kind of going forward, will they be picked up again? What I'm really asking is, going forward, given the financial situation we are in now, will we be able to carry on building houses? Or is this it for now until,
Well, that's kind of $1 million question, isn't it? I'm afraid to say, as you know, we've got quite far on Latimer Church. We actually bought the site. We have paused it because the building environment is not remotely favourable right now to do it. And we found we were building at far too high a cost. And Eden Way again paused, and we're working very closely with the Residents Association there to see the way forward. But I'm afraid, Councillor Rossi, the answer is they are paused for now. And we're looking at all different options financially to see what we can do.
I think we know that they're paused.
And I don't have a crystal ball.
What Councillor Ross.
but I think it's an important question to
Yes.
ask.
Absolutely.
We've gone through a learning process.
Yeah.
We have, for the first time in a generation, we have
Mhm.
built some
Exactly.
fantastic homes to a high standard. So what I'm asking, is this it? Or, do you think that we'll be able to pick up again and start again and pick up those two projects?
Ideally, I would love to say yes. I mean, yes, to create new council homes for our residents in our borough is absolutely essential. But on this point in particular, I've done a bit of research about how we provide homes in the borough through other ways. So since Grenfell, in RBKC, we've had about 1,700 homes have been built, and about 340 of those are affordable. So whilst we as a council are not actually building them, we are still contributing to building within the borough. And then in terms of us as a council owning them, we have, again, since Grenfell, we have bought 56 homes in the borough for temporary accommodation. So of course that is different from a council home, but it is still helping those residents who need help with housing. And and again, we're still going to be running that programme to buy temporary accommodation within the borough. And as you all know, we've got the pension fund to help with temporary accommodation outside. So I can't give you a definite yes, we're going to carry on
Okay.
Because I
So-
genuinely do not know.
I just come through with another question because this is years ago now. I brought it up when we were starting the new homes sort of the issue that in certain places like Earls Court, for example, there are a lot of old hotels which are not functioning anymore. And I was told at the time, and I think Dan was there, it's not, or Kim told me that it would not be financially viable to purchase them and redo them. But I still think in a borough where you haven't got very much in the way of space, whereas the space you have got could be very expensive to decontaminate, that it might be worth, I don't know, thinking about it.
Yeah,
Especially given the property market.
yeah, and there, it's also worth saying, I think, that there are kind of, and you're absolutely right to highlight the kind of council's constrained financial position and how that might make, for example, intervening to acquire and convert a hotel effectively prohibitively expensive, particularly an old building, which you'd have to do an enormous amount of work to bring it up to say to our safety standards. But there are other roles that a local authority can play in brokering an outcome that brings buildings back into use, other than just buying it and doing it themselves.
Okay.
If you see what I mean. So I think there's kind of, it's always worth thinking, how could we bring other investors and other players possibly to bear in order to achieve a similar
Because
outcome?
if you've got not enough land, which we all agree, but we have got some sort of buildings which are past their sell-by date in terms of purpose, it would make sense to utilise the existing housing stock.
So, well, we have done that with Princess Beatrice. So we have done exactly that. We have bought that and we have committed as a council to bringing that back into use. I mean, we could have stepped back and just let a private developer buy it and sell it for flats, but we have stepped in there. Can't do it on every single case, but we have that group.
So any recommendation by this committee to be looking at all possible solutions and inventive and creative ways to create more.
And some of those numbers, I can bring that back to
These are
you.
already being considered, you
Yeah.
say, which is great to hear. Now, I did see councillor Gardner's hand up.
Sort of structures. So 1.1 million, sorry, a flat. I think, it's a MT's point, that could have gone nicely towards converting larger size rooms in a hotel. How do we avoid those sort of site constraints that actually it was a very expensive site and they are small, flat, and they are
There was no economy of scale.
high on the cost.
Yeah.
If you started now, I think we talked about this last July actually, but if we started now, we probably would have ruled out. So we would have ruled that site out. Or at least we would have done all of the investigations first with all of the complexities and problems that we ended up with it. We wouldn't have moved forward. But having moved forward, what we have got is actually a really lovely scheme, a finished scheme. Almost finished scheme, almost handed over scheme. Some of the sites that we've got here, actually, there's some of the and actually, I just noticed there's a couple missing on them from the list of phase 3 sites. They may not be viable either, and so it isn't a case of just saying, we've got to. It's actually how viable are they? We already took St Helens out because it wasn't viable. It was too much per unit. The amount of grant that we got per unit was too small. It was better to pause it. And getting back to the point I made earlier, if you pause it and you stop and you start again, hand a small grant back. Next time around, get the grant at the right level to make something work if you're going to move forward with it ourselves, or explore something entirely different. Some of the sites that we had on the list, actually, I wouldn't have started from there. And I think it was constraints. It was where, what are all of the sites we could potentially develop as a borough to get to the target figure, and you wouldn't do it like that again, but we worked with what we had.
So is it right that given what you just said, that you've paused some sites, but actually you wouldn't do it? Should they be paused, or should you actually have that? No, they're removed entirely unless they come back in the future with a little grant. Because the pause, it comes back to the element of truth that you're looking for, or clarity, which is that these are genuinely paused because we'll look at them in the future. But actually, St Helens isn't viable, isn't unless some massive.
There was another one.
So actually, that isn't even on. The pauses, that's all.
That's all.
So Pause means pause, and so it's exactly as Soph said, it's,
You
you
could
know,
have
we
added
were-
the stopped ones in here as well.
Yeah,
So-
we could
I'm
have done,
just
but we didn't.
keen not to say some
Not
stuff
to
again.
see the same again, exactly right, so we, you know, obviously we're doing, you know, we've got these sites. And we'll get to them, but actually our focus has been get what we've got on the table delivered, look at these, then maybe exactly as Councillor Simmons said, there may be different ways that we should look at this to move forward, if actually it's right to move forward with those sites, or we consider our options, but I think, you know, that's why they're on a pause. So we,
Given the fact that housing associations are selling off some of their buildings, is there any way that perhaps the council could work with them so that they could have?
So we've had a lot of correspondence about this, haven't we, Linda? And again, it goes
I mean,
back to
because I
what,
know
I don't
lots-
want to repeat what we've just said about the economics of actually taking on old buildings and working with them. I think generally, probably not, but if we can encourage the housing providers to do something about it, then yes, as Dan said, there are different mechanisms to do it.
It's also worth saying that in the housing association sector generally, with the new obligations that all social landlords, including us, but also then have in respect to their existing stock, they have diverted quite a lot of capital investment from new build to shoring up the kind of quality and standards in their existing stock. And so it's generally fair to say that the appetite for development compared to 10, 15 years ago, when a lot of them were going at it really hard, appetite for development, appetite for either for developing their own or even buying Section 106 homes off of private development sites has dropped considerably, because they are focusing their resources, their limited resources elsewhere. So it's a kind of
Peabody had a lot of.
yeah, and Notting Hill Genesis are doing so. It's really it's now pretty much the norm, even in the big ones.
No, I just mention it because Notting Hill have just sold two complete houses in Longridge Road, and it's one that's about 10 flats, which we can't nominate people to, but it's kind of a trend.
And we have a standing arrangement with a number of housing associations, including Notting Hill Genesis, but where they are making, you know, no social housing provider wants to make decisions like that. But if it's genuinely impossible for them to economically maintain them, they will occasionally reluctantly reach that decision. We've got agreement with them that we would get first refusal on potentially acquired precisely in order to keep them in social housing if possible. I mean, sadly, it's usually the case that the reasons that they are disposing of them mean that, you know, it would be mad for us to take them on because they are not economically viable. It's no easier for us to sustain them as it has been for the selling landlord. But we do at least have that option, either for us to take them on as social rent or, you know, potentially as temporary accommodation if they're not viable as social rent. But it's sadly, particularly in boroughs like ours, you think about Notting Hill Genesis, who started here, and so by definition, some of their oldest, hardest to maintain stock is in this borough. But we're seeing that, and we're likely to see more of it as they have to make more and more difficult decisions in order to maintain the standards of their existing stock and fulfil those
And EPC ratings, special safety ratings. It's huge.
Of course, thank you. I'm just going to, do we have a question here? That's what you're saying. You don't have to.
Yeah, my question is different. I visited the site and it's really very beautiful. I'm really very happy. But my question is different. It's about a location. Are you planning or already planned? You know, the people who live in temporary accommodation, place it outside of the borough to return back, or is overcrowded, people who are living here overcrowded, you know, to allocate there. So what's the allocation system?
So we don't have Kojo here tonight to talk about the allocation policy because we weren't planning to talk about that. But we can definitely come back to you specifically about that, about our allocation policy and regarding the points, because obviously there are point system which is our allocation.
But the short answer is that every local authority is obliged to have an allocations policy. So ours is published on the website, and it describes exactly the point you're making, how you prioritise between those different categories of people who are eligible for housing. And the short answer is that we try and make sure that there's a fair distribution, so that every, you know, we're taking some from every category, but we're taking it in proportion to our assessment of need, if you see what I mean. But that is set out in the allocation scheme, which is a published document. But we're also obliged to keep it under review. So there may well come time when
we are. I'm hoping to be reviewing it quite soon.
Thank you, Dan, and thank you, to Harvey. And I think that's actually a really important question, because as Lloyd has said, I'm sure a lot of people would like to be able to live in these high quality new homes. And
And we prioritise local people in our borough already, but yeah.
well, it's good to hear from Dan about the allocations policy. And what I hope I won't be seeing is a disproportionate number of, let's say, direct offers. It will be according to the allocations policy, so that's good to hear. Thank you very much. Now, I have a couple of questions and points. I'll just go through them as quickly as I can. So on the question of Rettima Church, that's an example where it was a functioning building with a community organisation within it, which had to leave that building. And now that building is just out of use. And I think that is regrettable. And again, in terms of lessons learned, I hope that a lesson has been learned there from that site. If we're going to acquire a site, and I'm going to say eject a community organisation from the Grenfell ward, if we're going to do that, we need to be jolly well sure that we're delivering the reason why we're doing it. And if we're not doing that, what are we going to do to put it right? Because now we have an empty building, it has been squatted, which has got guardian in it, I think. And I don't know what the cost of that is to the council.
So
And that building will be deteriorating. Is there any way we can bring it back into some sort of community?
Yeah,
use?
So we're actively looking at that, but it is important to emphasise that the church owned the site and we reached an agreement with them that we would acquire it and move the project forward. So it's not quite, I think, we fair to say that we ejected them. It was an agreement that was reached.
Yes.
It was a collaboration.
We paid them,
And we paid them for it, exactly. But obviously it was an arrangement made on an expectation which has then not come to fruition about a facility being provided and then being able to move back in. So in that sense, I think we would all here agree exactly as you say that kind of this is not where we'd want to have been at this point. We've been in kind of constructive dialogue with the church. And we are also, exactly as you say, trying to figure out, while we figure out what is right, what can viably be delivered there and how, we are also trying to identify what options we can use to bring that building into a more kind of useful use than having guardians in there. So that's absolutely, you're absolutely right.
Thank you, thank you. I wanted to propose a possible recommendation, if we are in agreement, that in future phases of the New Homes programme, we make sure that we maximise the, let's say, number of bedrooms, size of homes, in keeping with the need and shortage, say 3 bedrooms. We could build a lot of 1-bedroom homes, I'm sure. But if we have significant need on our waiting list for larger homes, then we should be making sure that these are what we build. Because if we haven't got them, then we should be building them. And
Well, yeah.
And Dan's going to come in here about grants.
Yes.
Grants
So
versus
you're absolutely right about
GLA.
needing to match what we're building against
to that most
to
need,
what we understand about need. And actually the local planning policy, so any developer, including the council, but any developer that is building affordable housing in the borough has to build a mix of bedroom sizes in line with the council's planning policy. It doesn't apply to private housing, but it applies to all affordable housing. And that planning policy is informed by me, if you see what I mean. So it's absolutely, there's some 1-bed need, but you're absolutely right that the overwhelming need is for 2s and 3s. And so in our programme, that will always be what we try and focus on, and it will also be what the planning system focuses private developers on. I mean, and of course you're right. There's a natural sense in which the most number of homes can be delivered if you build small 1-beds or studios, but that for in an affordable housing context that would never be allowed by the planning system, even if we were trying to get away with it, which we wouldn't.
But do you want to touch on grants? Because that's the other thing. It hardly takes into account the different size bedrooms. So you have the planning authorities done by the Mayor of London, who doesn't take into account the room sizes. We're just about trying to kind of push on room sizes versus units. So again, that would be completely and utterly a way forward. Then the other side is the GLA grants as well that we get. It's often
which are on a per unit basis.
per unit. So we get a grant to build a per unit, and then we're up against it financially with our council budgets. You know, so we're caught between the.
we are, but can I give you an example? I don't think it's mentioned anywhere in this paper, and if I've missed it, then I do apologise in advance. I don't think I see anywhere here that the New Homes Programme was initiated as a commitment to build 600 homes. Now, what we have here, and pause means pause, and we don't know the answer of what's going to transpire. We also have some stopped ones, but it does say somewhere that exact number.
506.
I can see 168 to date. This is on page 20. The New Homes Programme has successfully completed phase 1, delivering 168 new homes, of which 108 are for social rent. Yeah. There are a further 98 homes under construction. And completion of these schemes will bring total delivered homes to 262, of which 157 are for social rent tenure. Right, that's okay, because I don't know where that 600 number came from. So by the same token, if we have a grant to assist in the building of new homes, and we are making sure that we are building, you mentioned 2 and 3, I would say 3 and 4, judging by the scale of the overcrowding that I see in my own casework. If we built half the number of homes, but they were 3 and 4 bedrooms, we would be doing a great thing for our families of this borough.
I would love for you to lobby Mayor of London on this, councillor, and I would love for you to lobby the government on this, because I agree. I think everything should be done on bedroom numbers, and then we would actually get that. But unfortunately, we have to work in the situation and circumstances.
We do, but I don't think we should be squeamish about saying we will deliver half of that if we are actually delivering something that's really going to make a dent in perhaps the biggest needs. I would be very happy to join you, Councillor.
We've already been challenged on our finances, and now we're
By who?
well, by the committee.
It's just that
By Councillor Gray challenged us on our finances, and now and a lot of our grant programmes rely on the grant.
I don't know if I'm being misunderstood here. I'm not challenging you.
No, you were agreeing that focusing on room sizes is important.
Yes, and I think, you know, trying to hold ourselves to a number that was arbitrary to begin with, and that there's been a lot of learning and changing circumstances since, is I think not necessarily necessary.
Just on that first part of the question about where did the 600 number come from in the first place, the target was set actually before I arrived, but my understanding is that it was based, it wasn't quite plucked from the air, it was based on a very early assessment of kind of
What we
possible
have,
sites.
yes.
That then, of course, as we did further detailed feasibility work, it turned out that some of those were pretty difficult. So it was a kind of, it was informed, but not informed at the level of detail, which was necessary to kind of have confidence in the programme, if that makes sense.
Thank you very much.
But it's interesting taking your point that the same thing applied to the Earls Court Exhibition Centre site application, where it was using rooms rather than
Unit numbers.
So what is that? It's translated into more single units when in fact we need family units. But it was interesting that it's the same problem.
Thank you. I wanted to quickly ask about the list of phase 3 sites. I've been told in previous years, give me some names, Warmer Road.
I've got to confess, actually, I was just looking at it, and there are 2 missing. One is along the road, and the other's
Lancaster,
So
I mean, it is.
and St Helens was not a phase, really phase. St Helens was a phase 1 that was stopped.
So I think
They shouldn't be. They shouldn't be.
it's fine. They've been stopped. They've been stopped, have they?
I know they're phase 3 paused under review, but when you go back to your questions and points that you as a select committee were making, the test on the smaller sites. So, for example, the Warmer Road site, it's very small. It was, I think it was another 11 unit one, right?
It's less. I think it was around 9.
Okay, small number of units on a small site. we're not, that's why it's partly why it's paused.
We're very, very
So-
close to ground floor.
Economy of
And-
scale.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
right.
that
And
also-
complexities
Yeah.
around the Lancaster Road site, because that site has a youth provision there. It's got sports facilities that the school next door is using, and that was identified as a housing site years ago. But actually, it's probably one of the hardest ones to deliver without, because you've got to remove stuff and re-provide it to be able to build housing. So it would have been a bit like Balby, where you put in the sports provision at ground floor or at the back of the building.
So again, it goes back to your question about Sorcerer Arches, very small triangular site, right next to TfL, the underground unit. We have learnt that we do not want to do other sites like that. So
It's
these
right
are
next to
sites
the
we-
railway line, let's be very,
Yeah,
very
that's
clear. I don't think we need, I don't know how I can reassure people, but I think we don't need to be squeamish or fearful of just saying it how it is. Because I think saying it how it is how we're going to get better outcomes and results. And let's be clear, that Silchester Arches site is it 2.5, 3 metres or so? It's very, very close to the actual railway line that goes along the arch. Very, very close. Residents were concerned about it to begin with. As you say, you might not have continued with that if. Yeah.
Again.
So what I'm concerned about in the context of, say, Latimer Christian Centre.
Yeah.
Walmer Road, I think we're talking about the doctor's
It
surgery.
is fallen surgery.
Right, and we do care about the health of the dental community and make sure that provision is not interrupted. Certainly not interrupted for a thing that's going to be stopped or might not come to fruition. The Lancaster Road one, I think, are we talking about the Lancaster Youth Centre? Yeah. So again, the same, because these are things being delivered from there, and I think we want to be very mindful about disrupting those on a maybe when there's a lot of unknowns. But I did want to say we are going to be looking forward to the overall lessons learned that's going to come in 2027 at the end of phase 2. That's going to be great. I think in the meantime, this paper does give us, and it sort of gives us the evidence of real concrete things where changes have been made. And when we say lessons learned, it's very easy words to say, but unless you have the concrete detail, it's just words. And this paper here does actually give us some real detail on what those lessons are and what the changes have been made. You've given us some examples of how those lessons have been improving things or preventing things with phase 2, which is really, really encouraging to hear. So I hope that this can continue. One thing I want to say, which is general, there are elements of the report which are a little bit vague. So when we said we've done a number of things or numerous things have happened, for me, I'd like to say, well, if you're talking about a number of things, let's say the number. And it is sort of implied, and it does then go on to list what things. And when it's well, we've done many things, including, well, is that comprehensive? So I think that's just a general thing for all papers, not just here and not just. And I just want to check. I think most of my other things have already been covered. I just wanted to make one suggestion, which is to the lead number.
Yes.
Which is about our very high spec, good and high spec on our kitchens and bathrooms in the New Homes programme. And I'm wondering how we feel about the kitchens and bathrooms in the needed works and housing management. Because I've seen some very timely question, because I have seen some photographs of those, and they are very depressing.
Oh,
and I question in terms of quality and spec, and I question how those are going to last for 20 or 30 years respectively.
okay. Well,
So I wonder if there's something we can do to look at those.
definitely. Well, in fact, this morning I was actually visiting some of our kitchens and bathrooms in our existing homes in North Kensington with our contractor that has the contract far wide to do them. And the ones I saw were actually excellent quality, and the choices available. There's one lady who's put in these beautiful blue tiles in her bathroom, which is absolutely fabulous. Another one's just gone straightforward white ones. and the kitchen looks good. I mean, it's quite a disruption to do it, definitely. I mean, we're chasing, one kitchen we looked at, chasing everything into the wall. We're not even doing surface mounted conduits and stuff. So, that's quite significant, and you're still living there. So I genuinely do not think the quality is an issue. I think the disruption is an issue, and the planning and the programming is absolutely essential to get that right.
Yes, it is. I mean, disruption is a huge issue.
Yes.
But I will say this kitchens and bathroom programme came to the TCC, and I think the contractor came as well.
Yes, and they've done a lot of training,
And,
a lot of
and they showed us sample photographs.
So good
And
news.
I did ask
Mhm.
the TCC how they feel about these, and nobody answered. There was a collective sigh in the room that nobody really knew what to say.
Okay, well, let's take that away, because what we are doing, we've asked the contractor to, in some of the empty offices in Pembroke, actually set up a mock kitchen and a mock bathroom, and then show the 5 different types of finishes you can have. There's 5 different choices of door handles, 5 different choices of cupboard finishes, worktops, tiles. So we're going to do that. So then, and then we'll video that as well if you can't actually get down to look at it. And so hopefully we'll bring more people with us about that it's worth putting up with a bit of the disruption, and obviously we're going to manage the disruption better. But so then at the end, you'll have this lovely new kitchen and lovely.
Is it something that committee members will see?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
I'm happy to circulate photographs, or to ask Iago to circulate the photographs that we had at the TCC, because I felt very depressed when I saw them. 20 years of that. I will circulate them so the committee know what we're talking about.
So you're talking about old kitchens and bathrooms?
I'm
or
talking
new kitchens?
our new kitchens and bathrooms programme. It was an agenda item at the TCC.
The most recent one.
Claire, were there pictures of bathrooms, just pictures of kitchens?
So there were pictures, sample pictures of the new kitchens and the new bathrooms.
So I thought they were all kitchens, but never mind.
I think there was a bathroom there as well. Very narrow it was. Do you remember?
Okay.
It was a very narrow one. Yes, Lloyd.
Just one quick question. I just asked about the property acquired in 2018, Granger,
Yes.
78. Just
So
about that
that's
on that.
Bowmore House, right?
Yeah,
next
so
to the leisure
we,
centre.
before Grenfell, the council reached an agreement for build to rent at Granger to build some homes on council owned land. And then it was a joint venture where then both the Granger and the council would share the revenue from the rents. The terms of that deal were changed after Grenfell because of the new priority the council was placing on new social rents. So effectively we agreed instead that once those homes were completed, we would buy them back and just split them out. So they were included in the numbers of the new homes program because they were new social rent homes, but we didn't build them ourselves. But the Granger built them and bought back. And that includes Bowmore Road. There was some other Bowmore Road.
Potentia and Chelsea, I think.
I was that on one too, yeah. So they're dotted around. It was a pre-Grenfell deal that was repurposed afterwards.
But where was it?
Where?
Bowmore Road.
Bowmore Road,
It's just
Hortensia
by the
Road,
legislature.
Middle Row, they're dotted around. It's not
So
all
is
one
that
side.
is a 168?
So the table, it's in the table just above the paragraph,
Page
so it's
20.
quite clear on page
Yeah,
20.
the table underneath paragraph
Oh, yeah,
6.5.
Granger, yeah.
Yeah, and then you've got Lots Road and then Lots Road.
So it's 78 in total and they're 100% social.
So is that 78 in the 168?
So what we
So if you look at the table rather than the.
168
Yeah,
is
I'm
phase one.
asking,
168 is phase one.
Well, we say 168 new homes.
I think it
That
is.
Is that
That's phase
78
one.
in there?
If you add Kelso Cochrane, no, I think it is. I think if you add Kelso Cochrane, Acklam Road and Hewer Street, that gives you 90. And then Granger is 78. So I think that's right. I think the 168 is Kelso Cochrane, Acklam Road, Hewer Street, maybe one of our own new people.
So you
Plus
built
Granger.
90, yeah?
So there were 90 in that phase one, and then 78.
So that is, when we say other size, that's phase one, Jen.
I think for the purposes of that 168 number, I'm just saying that because that's the numbers add up to.
Darling repeated.
Thank you very much.
It's not.
Do we have any councillors in the room who would like to ask a question? Thank you so much for your consideration, but no. Thank you anyway, really. Yes. Do we have any residents who would like to ask a question in the room? I don't see any. So in that case, I would like to, before you all fantastic go, I would like to
make a vote of thanks from this committee towards Dan Hawthorne for everything he's done for this council and how sorry we are to see you go, and we wish you all the very best in your next role. Thank you, Dan. It doesn't do it. So we in that case, thank you very much, everyone. So we move on to item 5 of the agenda, which is the voluntary sector support fund VSSSF consultation and review. This report provides background on the VSS programme, including its past achievements. It then covers the consultation and engagement that has taken place with residents and the VCS to help answer questions around future aims, priorities and visions for the programme. Councillor Sarah Addenbrook will present this report alongside Moira Ugoji and Gabby Sinclair-Constance. Welcome.
Thank you, Chair. And actually, sorry, Chair. And I think actually you covered most of it. This is really an update on the consultation and review, which is ongoing. I mean, officers met again with BCS and are going to meet again next week, I think. So really, we're just bringing it here for you to see where we've got to.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to open this to questions from the committee. I'm going to begin by just drawing everyone's attention to page 35, 2.1, where we're asked to comment on the engagement process, review the outcome of the survey, review and comment on the possible models of funding for the VSSSF programme. Now, this page does explain to us how important it is that this committee has input into the particular conversations around 3 models. So I hope that we will be able to contribute constructively to that. I'm so saying, who would like to commence the discussion? Oh, Moira,
Yes, I'd just like to make a comment before we commence the discussion and just mention that those 3 possible models are items for discussion. We're not saying that one of those models will be the model. It's just to understand what the priorities for the sector are, what your views are. We do believe that it's likely that it might be a hybrid of the 3 models. Some bits from different models will be the final one, or it might be something completely different. So these are just topics for discussion. They're not what we're saying the model is.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, because unbeknownst to you, that might have been what one of our suggestions was going to be around hybridising these.
Yeah, but I think one thing that came out very clearly is that people still want 3-year funding, which I know previously they didn't have. We then brought it in, and I think that's really important for the organisations.
I agree. Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very
Could I
much.
just have clarity on what is the pot we are talking about? So what's the current pot and what's the future pot that is on the table?
It's 1.3 is the existing pot.
And the intended pot?
40% less, isn't it?
All right.
Yes, it's about 750.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Still cool too.
Councillor Reynolds.
I think that one of the things that when I read through this that I would have liked to see is if there's the view of north, central and south, it would have been useful to be able to see which organisations fell into those areas, because it could be that there may be areas of where they could support in another area to make it more economic viable and also provide the support that might not have been there before. But it's, or you might find that there's a concentration in one to the detriment of, for example, south of the borough. So I would have thought it would be quite useful to see. That's why I asked you for that list this morning. Really, it was whether or not they fell into north, central or south in order for us to be able to consider.
I think
Does that
one-
make sense?
Yeah, but I think the other thing is, sort of looking back over the last couple of years, there are so many organisations delivering the same thing. And I think there needs to be a discussion within the sector about can they work together, which they did a bit on the public health funding. It's organisations coming together. So it's probably three. And they weren't necessarily in the same area. They could be going across areas to deliver things that really matter and work for people. And I think hopefully we'll see more of that, because I don't see in the current financial environment, not just from the cancer side, but everywhere, how everybody can exist. And so I think this is a real opportunity actually for the sector to look at themselves and work out how are they going to sustain themselves going forward.
And also some work across the borough,
Yeah.
and other are very local,
Yes.
or quite local. So I don't know whether it makes, but then we always say that the centre of the borough is left out, kind of thing. So I don't know whether it makes sense to look at it in that way.
It's just that I'm going through the list, I could see there were some very good organisations. Yes, they could probably work better together, but the fact was that it did result in what I would call geographical voids, where the services that are required are not being delivered, but could potentially be delivered by an organisation. If you look at we just think about the central bit where you have response, which has the space, but it's only delivering a small amount of benefit if it doesn't take it. But if one of these organisations could position themselves there and be able to deliver the service, that might be better value for money.
So Response are working with two organisations in Chelsea, actually on the public health funding. So they're not working alone in some cases. I know what you're. Yeah.
Yes.
And I would say also, if we're looking at the current BSSF awardees, we have to bear in mind that they might not be the same group that get BSSF.
Is that the one that covers nucleus?
No, that's the information advice guidance.
Sorry.
It's
Just
following on.
is that for up to
That's a different regime, it's a different program. So that's a contract, and it's a 5+2 year contract that was let last year. Okay. So it's not part. It used to be part of the Voluntary Support Fund, but because it's quite a different type of service being delivered, we separated it from Voluntary Support Fund and target advice provision.
The reason why I asked was when I looked down the list, quite a few of them in this particular budget stream appears to be providing information and support. So I couldn't quite work out.
Yes, I would say that every voluntary sector organisation probably does provide information and advice. That it's kind of the nature of voluntary sector organisations, but the contract is quite different in terms of the quality of advice.
It's expert advice.
Yes,
and
expert
guidance,
advice, yes. Legal expert
including
advice.
legal advice and
Yeah.
so forth.
Well, they
So
don't provide legal advice. In fact, they only provide benefits.
That's why we've got a consortium, so that the different types of advice are provided across all three organisations.
But there's
I
one
think,
particular-
Linda, I think we need to come, when we're talking about the IAG, that might be for another meeting.
Yeah, I was just going to say that Kensington and Chelsea Social Council used to have sessions in the centre and the centre of the borough, which they no longer do. And it feels that actually it's quite North Kensington centric rather than Kensington and Chelsea across the borough.
Well, they're a borough-wide umbrella organisation, aren't they?
Yeah, but they used to have a session, which was, they might have done one in the north and then they do one in the
So we
centre.
would have to speak to them, I guess, about how they've rationalised their services. But I wanted to come in, Linda, on the question of geographical avoidance, because there's also the question, and it came out quite strongly in the consultation, I think, around deprivation and need. And this was something that the organisations were very keen as a priority. So presumably there is some analysis of the geographical distribution of deprivation in need. And presumably the team will be aware of where those pockets are in the centre and in the
I was
south.
talking about Sarah in West Cromwell Road and in some places in Earls Court. They do come under deprivation and sometimes get overlooked in
I think
these
yeah,
discussions.
There's a lot, yeah, the centre quite often is, the central wards feel left out.
Yeah.
Or we have it very sparse, like in my ward, the only thing we have is the Earls Court Youth Club, which is excellent, but that's the only thing we've got in the ward. There's nothing else, so,
But I mean,
Apart from
if
churches
you
and-
think of West Cromwell Road, if you think of the Notting Hill Genesis stuff over Tesco's, if you think of, was it 23% RSL stock in, and plus the HMOs in Earls Court, and yet we don't have the services that I think that we need for some of our residents. So I presume your
Well,
case would
the only thing I would say, there are over 600 PCS organisations in the borough.
No,
We only,
saying-
but we only fund a very small amount of them. I don't know what's available throughout the borough. I don't know who the whole 600 are. Maybe we should have a list.
I mean, that's, I
available.
think that's just getting back to the question of part of the geographical, where these people are located, in order that we can almost identify areas or pockets of deprivation, and then be able to either get those services to deliver in the central part, even if it was kind of a day or whatever, a week. But actually, I think we do have to acknowledge that there is a need. And it would be very useful to see how this could be planned out. I think that it would be useful to do that before we.
So we went out to all the organisations, and obviously not everybody came back. So it is an ongoing process. And we just have to keep looking. I think your point about focusing on deprivation is really important. I think it's really looking at how we can reduce the need on council, how we can build that BCS organisation or the organisations to be more resilient and provide services that stop people coming into council services, because there's going to be less council services
Sorry,
going
just
forward.
on that point, I think there's two things. One, sorry, Councillor Wade, I did send the document this morning. I'm not sure if you got that.
I did.
The last column
Yes,
actually speaks to which ward each of the organisations deliver in.
it's small.
It is small. If you want me to go through it, I can, but it's for all 29 organisations. They've all got awards, and speaks to what you're saying. The only one that's
Was
specific.
that circulated to the whole committee?
That went to.
I saw it.
Yeah.
I
it
asked
went
her
to-
to-
Because I have a copy as well.
Yes, I can do that. I can do
Yes.
it. Yes, it did.
I think let's do the whole committee.
The last column in that document speaks to each organisation and where they deliver. So I think there are half of them deliver borough-wide, but a lot of them are single ward. And on the additional point, so we have put together a GIS map of all of the 600 organisations, which Sarah and I will go through this week. So that will feed into the discussions we have about where the need is. I think there is a clear separation between north and south, definitely, in terms of the number of organisations amassed in the north, and there are a few dotted around the south. I mean, some of which are not even in the borough, but they deliver to people in our borough. So there is probably a more systemic issue there as well.
Can I just go back to Sarah's point about viability? In the surveys, a lot of people were going on, we need to keep the core funding. And we know why people are saying that, because when they've got the core funding, it's easier for them to get, people don't like to pay to keep the lights on or whatever. So realistically, going forward, we can't, as far as I can see, we can't continue to do core funding for all of the organisations that we are currently.
Yeah, and what's become evident is that some organisations haven't done any match funding,
Yes,
which is what they should be doing to make themselves more resilient.
yes, yes. And I do repeat that a lot, but not everyone. So yeah, I mean, I looked at the three sets of proposals, and I couldn't really pick any of them, because you actually have to say, well, if we're losing 40%, is it 40 or 50%? And then we can't give everyone the same amount of money. It's obvious. Even if we're losing 20%, we can't give everyone the same amount of money.
And if you look at a lot of the organisations that applied offer from the youth sector, and that's, I think, because the youth offer hadn't been agreed at that point.
Yes.
And they were worried. So a lot of them applied to the BSSF who previously had not received the
Yes.
BSSF funding.
Yes. So, I mean, I don't envy. I mean, I think what we have to do is we've really got to try and, you know, keep the good ones, you know, keep the good bits, I think, and look at areas of deprivation, distribution throughout the borough, and the ones who operate borough-wide, are they really operating borough-wide?
Yes.
Or are they just really concentrating in a couple of wards, you know?
I mean,
Exactly.
depending on where they are in the borough, some they get a lot of residents coming in from Hammersmith who put them on
Yes,
bread.
exactly.
So
I mean, we get kids in the youth club, we get kids from
Hammersmith.
we do, but they're mainly local or from Oscar.
Some from Earls Court.
Some. I know
Only
that's-
some, it's called a
it's
report.
disputed, you have to talk about it.
Thank you.
Councillor Gardner. As you know, I've struggled with the fact that the advice and guidance was let for 7 years, 5+2. And I feel that essentially they're ring fenced and they're protected, whereas other things are going to have look at, so it's taking up more of your budget, which means there's less of the budget for the voluntary sector. So I look at it and I kind of go, at this stage, I would have rather they were all in the mix and we could be looking at them. But we are where we are. I just maybe put that down for the future.
But at that time, we didn't have financial pressures that we are now going to be under.
No.
So
But I also appreciate it didn't come to scrutiny until it was a done deal. So I think we could have guided you or had that conversation then in terms of conversation. But for me, I kind of look at this, and this is that: do you pair everybody back, where actually you get full service from everybody, or are you better actually saying people need to amalgamate, and that would be my space. The one that really stands out on this is the volunteer centre, which is getting triple figures.
Yes.
And you're kind of going, what do you provide? What are they providing for that in comparison to some of the other organisations, which are really sort of actually out there and grafting? And I genuinely look at it and I go, I do not understand enough about that organisation's services, because I thought actually they were facilitating and pull things together as opposed to providing things. So I kind of automatically look at this and go,
I don't actually know what they do, the volunteer centre.
well, they host job opportunities or volunteer
It
opportunities.
does seem like an awful lot for coordinating volunteers.
well, I have to say, when I inherited this just before it was agreed, I was surprised at the infrastructure amounts, to be honest. They did an amazing job over COVID, getting all the DBS checks done for volunteers. So but I'm kind of,
And then as regards to the actual models, I think it's very hard to give it some other external third-party body to work out grants, because I think we do have a transparency in the method. Sometimes it may not always be to your liking, the transparency level, but we do have, we do have criteria, and I feel that if you give that role, which I think is model 2, to a third party, I just think that's wrong, because it means that everybody starts bickering over whether that third party, and actually what you're doing is you're essentially paying that third party to be an admin, and I don't think that's what we want to do. We want that money to be best used by the organisation, so it goes directly for use, as opposed to having an interim party that then serves it down. So my fit was more in model 3, but I'm open to either.
Thank you.
Or you could go for one, but just have more rather than 8 to 10, have 15 or something like that. And slightly cut it down. Then you'd have more organisations. I think model 3 is a bit heavy in terms of how it's going to.
I find it very hard.
Did
I think I can't read my sorry.
3 years is just an opportunity. It's like the 3 years is that's done.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
So we are keeping the 3 years.
Yes, that's the fundamental, yes.
Because then they can get other funding in and
And
whatever.
that's because I remember when we first funded them, I think they had it for a year and then it was 18 months and they kept saying to us, we need it for longer.
I just point out in terms of the funding, whether it's lots of organisations with a little bit of money or fewer organisations with more money, that's a conversation that we're having with the sector. It's about trade-offs. If we give a lot of money to lots of a little money to lots of organisations, then we have reduced funding. We're trying to get the most out of that money. We will be, as you said, delivering support to the sector, but not necessarily to residents. So the money could be used for the organisations, but they won't necessarily deliver the outcomes that we're trying to achieve with the reduced funding. Whereas obviously with fewer organisations with larger funding, that means more organisations might not be able to access the funding. But then again, as Sarah said, we fund very few organisations in the sector anyway. It's not going to have a detrimental impact on the sector generally because we're funding, I would say, 10% of the sector as things stand. So I mean, that is a question that we have to think about, is where is that money going to have the best impact?
Yeah. So Joanna, did you say you would towards model 3?
Correct.
Yep.
I was just wondering, have you gone through the process of prioritising sector? So is one for mental health or one for older people, or have you gone through that exercise?
So we're looking at what all the different directorates spend on the BCS across council, because obviously it's not just us, it's adults, children's, property. So it's trying to bring all that together. And I think you know that there was a BCS property review as well, which.
And I just wondering whether or not prioritising certain sectors might help join up some of the people. I mean, because you've got SMART, for example, in the north, in Southern Borough.
You didn't previously have the SSF funding.
But you know what I mean, that it would be easier to, because if you have a name, you don't necessarily know what they deliver. Unless you know the organisation. If you don't know the organisation, you don't know. Just an idea.
Is there overlap? I mean, have we looked at certain, you know, they're two different charities, but there's quite a lot of overlap in the sphere they're working in.
And that's where we hope they're going to talk to each other at the meeting.
Yeah, merge or whatever.
I just ask, you met with the voluntary sector in January. Did you get any further feedback or any more clarity?
Yeah, we did. We met with them this week, last week. I suppose last week. And they were similar. They said a lot of things similar to what's been said today. They didn't want any one of these models, but at the same time recognise that there are elements of the models they like. We found that there is not, you know, sector's not homogenous. They haven't got one thought. They in terms of what works best. So half of the room agree that, you know, smaller amounts for more organisations. Half of the room agree with a larger amount. Half of the room don't want us to change the way we've done it, and half of the room do. Because what we've done is pull together the ward data, deprivation data. We pulled together the GIS mapping in terms of where duplication might happen. We've pulled together what we currently do. One of the things that the team are doing now is looking at impact So we're trying to identify how much smaller amounts can still achieve impact. So we're looking at all of that at the moment before we go into deliberation and start and take on what you've said here to start to kind of design that final recommended model.
And I know some of the got the smaller grants last time, and that actually it gave them a chance to breathe, stand back and be more strategic and think about how they were going to apply to other people for funding, because before they were just, scrabbling around, just trying to keep their head above water. So it's quite interesting how some.
And also when we're trying to apply for funding, it's difficult to apply for core funding, and it's very difficult to apply for funding if you have uncertainty around, if you don't have 3 years funding, core funding in place, or you don't have a secure situation in a building, say, it can be really very difficult to actually get the other funding. So I think there are elements there that we as council can do things which actually help the organisation rather than hinder it to be able to access other sources of funding.
The trouble will be, because we're catching quite a lot, that the other sources of funding is going to get very, very competitive.
Yes.
And I think we have to acknowledge that.
But that's where some of the infrastructure organisations previously have helped people write their bids. So they're not just, they are actually supporting them.
There are more than one infrastructure organisation.
The Social Council,
Yeah, that's one.
Young NC.
Oh, of course.
Yes,
Yes, Gavin.
I was just going to say, in terms of organisations that essentially we could allow to do some of the work, so stuff. I want to speak to the point that you made was around, and it speaks to the point around the amount that organisations, voluntary sector organisations, can do with small amounts of money. We're recognising that there is a huge amount that they can do with small amounts of money. So, for instance, an organisation that is working really closely with a small community, the impact's quite large, but it's not necessarily scalable. So we're looking at things like that, but at the same time, recognising that, for instance, if we outsource some of the grants to some of the sector, they can work a lot more flexibly. They can work in a way that we can't sometimes as well. So we're taking all of that into consideration for this model, and at the same time, mindful that we have to be responsible to both our residents and taxpayers in terms of using the money.
Would anyone else do you have a comment, or shall I begin with mine?
So yes, deprivation and need, I think we need to sort of make sure that we balance that, because
Governments and councils very often will say we were supporting the most vulnerable. Does that mean the one most vulnerable person, the 500 most vulnerable? And just because somebody is more vulnerable than you or more deprived than you, doesn't mean that you don't have a need. So I think we need to, the point about making sure that there aren't geographical gaps, and I think it's an important one, while at the same time making sure that we are mindful of deprivation, because we look at where most deprived wards are in the borough. They are, for whatever reason, concentrated in.
and also in terms of duplication.
So let's just say we have got 7 organisations that are delivering football, say. But let's just say that they are all operating at capacity. This is demonstrating there's a need there. And then we can look at the outcomes as well. So I think duplication per se doesn't necessarily mean that there's sort of surplus. If people still can't access whatever it is that they might want to access.
I was wondering as well how the VSSSF fits in with direct and in-kind support. Sorry, with direct support for organisations and in-kind support.
Oh,
These are 2 other things which may or may not be being reduced. I'm wondering if they are.
They are, then they're not, in that we still have the officer resource to provide that support. So we do our master classes, that's not going to change. And we do provide any supports, like we advise the sector as well. We advise organisations
At the moment, we tended to focus on those organisations that we fund, with some exceptions. But going forward, we're thinking more about supporting the wider sector, whether they receive funding or not, because there are going to be fewer organisations receiving funding. So we're going to be providing that support as well. Where we need to step in to provide, different types of support, that will be taken on a case-by-case basis.
Because I think we perhaps need a little bit more transparency around who we are providing direct and in-kind support to, because that doesn't come within the BSSF, it doesn't come in a report. I think there are some issues that perhaps are creating a perception among residents and organisations, which we could avert if we had some more transparency there. So that was just one piece.
I think sometimes in terms of the support, depending on what support is needed, sometimes we're reacting. And so if an organisation comes to us that is in dire need of support, whether it's around governance or around thinking about finance, because we will go in and provide that intensive support, there isn't necessarily a decision-making process, it's the need that's there in the sector. So
It'd still be good to know what's happening, because I think transparency, even if it is sort of crisis response kind of thing, I think transparency will allay a lot of concerns, and to be able to also demonstrate the safe fairness. So that was another point. The questionnaire, looking at appendix sort of 1. When we are reporting the questionnaire, I'm not sure how strong a point this is. It's maybe just a sort of light touch one, but when we are reporting the question, we say a majority of respondents, 85%, think that council should still provide core funding. That's because they were asked the question, given the context, should we still provide core funding? And so, to some extent, the answers, you could say, have potentially been a little bit shaped by the questions. I'm not saying that the answers are not valid, not useful, but I just wanted to sort of really consider, if we can continue to fund core costs, how should we prioritise those that apply? And then there were a set of options. I don't know if there was also, for instance, a free text box or some space for other. There was with Johnny Borden.
You'll see that
Just
one. Yeah.
a question around the methodology. Thank you. That does actually answer that. So I think in terms of our sort of input into the models, and committee do feel free to kind of jump in here. I think collectively we sort of feel there are strengths potentially in all of them and caveats in all of them. I'm getting the page now. You're very away. So I'm really encouraged to hear that you're thinking it may be some sort of hybrid model. I think as a committee, it would be really good to see what sort of final proposed model you kind of arrive at. Perhaps even before it's finally decided, because I think we can have sort of slightly hypothetical input into some of the themes and points to come up in these three proposals, but until we see how they are going to be potentially hybridised, it's kind of difficult to get a clear steer for you.
We will be
Beyond the very general.
We will be going back once we have part of the model. We'll be going back to the sector with the model, and at that time we'll come to.
Okay.
We'll not come to scrutiny because there won't be a meeting, but there'll be a briefing. Yes, to scrutiny at the same time.
Fantastic. So that will be ahead of the launch date in March.
Yes.
So maybe in February.
Yes, they'll definitely be in February.
And we can have a paper and we can more conversation about that and actually just see the model.
Yes,
that would be excellent.
Can I jump here?
Yes, you can. Yeah.
Thank you very much. The three models, and none of them are friendly to small organizations. The last one, it mentions about partnership, but there is no points which says small organizations will benefit three models. And small organizations, they are the first contacts of the grassroots. You know, they are linguistically and culturally friendly. Some of the large organizations we fund, we take to a client, they cannot provide interpretation. They say, oh, we cannot provide interpreter, we cannot do this, we cannot do this. So most of the residents, they benefit more from the small organizations, and the three models are not flexible for this. The other points which the chair mentioned also is duplication, and duplication, the way I interpret is there is organizations who got funding from 3-4, different bodies of the council, either the council involved directly or indirectly. And then there is small organization, they don't get any funding at all. Well, other organizations, they get 3 or 4, funding from the barrel. So I would like this also to look at. And this model is, maybe there should be a 4 model, which, explains how you can support these small organizations who really do a very fantastic to the residents, very fantastic service and to the residents in the valley.
Thank you.
So I think it's really good that this is partly at a sort of early stage where the ideas are still being fleshed out. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to comment and share our thoughts on that. I just have one final sort of general point, which again is sort of speaking to concerns that some residents and organisations have, where we talk about anchor organisations or a single infrastructure partner. I'm guessing that might be something like ACSC type organisation, so strategic partners. I think there may have certainly over the last 8.5 years been a sort of perception around preferred partners and by extension unpreferred partners. And I hope that with this, whatever the final model turns out to be, that we can use this juncture as an opportunity to perhaps give some assurance that we are moving away from that sort of operation.
We can give assurance. As you say, it's a perception, not necessarily the case that we have preferred organisations.
No, but I think it is our duty collectively as a council to address perceptions, especially where they may not be accurate. And I think this is an opportunity to do so.
And I think what's really important is that, it's based on people's applications. And so if somebody is not very good at writing applications, then they're going to need some support, which is what became very evident 3 years ago when we did the last round, was that some organisations can't write applications.
So do you therefore offer workshops?
Yes, we do. And as part of the application process, we offer workshops on how to complete the application, what we're looking for. And also officers are available to talk with, not complete their applications, but talk with the applicants on making sure their applications are of a standard where they could be shortlisted possibly. So we should try that.
And I know some organisations in the sector work together and help each other because they know that some people are struggling.
And I suppose on top of that, the thing that we are doing differently this time round is using a lot more data. Although we will be scoring applications, we're going to try and embed some of the data findings so that whether you write a good application or not, it's not going to necessarily mean we're going to end up with all the organisations in one small geographic area just because they wrote good applications. Or, so we're looking at that at the moment in terms of the processes for the application process.
Okay. And we're also rationalising, I think it is in this paper, we're also rationalising this sort of in-kind support around buildings and rents, subsidies.
So BCS property review.
Yeah.
Thank you.
What weighting will you put on the application, or what weighting will you put on that
That's
data?
that's what we've done here, exactly, that's the point I'm making, so we didn't weigh anything last time.
It was just the
So,
application.
yeah,
So I was just thinking, you know, there's a need to be transparent when
Yeah.
people are filling in the application, that there's a different weighting.
so we will have to put that in the guidelines, but we will do that. So for instance, duplication, for instance, if we look at an organisation that's delivering next door to another one that's delivering, but they're not speaking to anybody. So we did have weighting around resilience last time and some stuff around in duplication as well. But we're going to be looking wider than that.
Thank you. So I think we've had quite a full discussion there. I'm going to ask if there's any councillor in the room would like to make any question or observation.
No, the audience is silent.
Thank you, councillor Will.
So, yeah, we do need to have clarity on the direct support, I think, for this committee, just some transparency around what has been and where and who. And also.
Sorry, can I just have a
Yes.
clarification? Is that in relation to VSSF recipients? Because we offer a lot of support that is just coming into the department, community partnerships, and they're not recipients, but are just
Yes,
asking
I
for
know,
support.
I
So
know.
what should, yeah,
It's all.
everybody.
And I'm also very pleased to see that you assure us that we will see the model when it takes more final shape at the stage when it's going back to the BCS.
So just thinking with the cyber attack, are we going to be able to get our hands on all that information?
What information? Direct support information.
I mean, I'm just thinking
Yeah,
that there was one organisation that didn't bid for the BCS, applied to the BSSF, I should say, last time because they were receiving funding from elsewhere. That stopped. So we've been talking to them about who they can apply to.
Yeah, I mean, we can just get the information.
do you mean
from
that
offices
kind of
and
thing?
stuff.
That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
There's no, I don't think, urgency on that. Just,
We can.
you know, I don't want it to be onerous, but I think if we can have some transparency, then certainly we can perhaps give assurance as well when it comes up for us.
Yeah, we
But
can-
Linda,
While this team is here, this is slightly, given the fact we've got a lot of people who haven't received housing benefit, I was just wondering whether there was going to be some facilitation of supporting people when they have to pay the council tax. I think they're going to some people who the council tax hasn't been taken, but on the other hand, that they haven't had housing benefit. And I just wondered whether we're going to have a potential of debt or debt management. And I just wondered whether, as you're three here, whether we
Well, actually, probably should have asked off.
yes, no, but I mean,
So
in
there
terms
is an
of
element,
the
Linda.
organisations.
There is an element with that sits within housing.
Yeah, but
Now,
I
I
was just
know
wondering, we've
that-
got organisation, we're discussing charitable organisations that provide support and advice. And I just wondered whether this was something that we could be thinking of.
So we would want to make sure that our organisations who do provide support and advice are able to advise people around issues around housing. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I
Yeah.
mean, it's just as we had this through her.
Yeah.
Yes,
And you know the organisations better than anybody else. I just think it's something
Because
that might be planned.
also communications around the cyber attack might partly fall within your remit as well.
There are a number of partnership meetings that we have with the sector, a safe meeting, a resilience meeting, where the information advice and guidance partnership attends. So when we do discuss that, so yes, that comes.
Right, because I mean, it's just I can see that there's some people who I just totally were unaware of their council tax wasn't going out.
Yeah,
And
it's something that is put on the agenda by the voluntary sector regularly, so we are talking about that.
so sorry if I went slightly off piece.
No, that's fine.
These
Thank
three
you.
people know more about it
Thank
than
you.
anybody else.
so in that case, I think that's wraps up this item for us and for you. Thank you very much for coming.
Yes.
Thank you for your comments. So we move to item 6, which is the final item on our agenda for tonight, which is the Select Committee Work Programme 2025-2026. And this report is an update on the work programme's meeting activities, assessing out the reports for what will be the final meeting of the municipal year. So that will be March the 4th, and if you look on page 60.
And so presumably,
Can I
not
just-
pick
Sorry?
something up which was in the action plan, which we didn't discuss earlier.
Yes.
It's about Princess Beatrice House. It says something is being set. But let me see, page 12. Well, it says a meeting has been scheduled with the lead member and ward councillors to update them. But that's not the case.
Is that not the case? Okay, my understanding from the officers was that that has been set up, but if it hasn't, I can follow.
I am not aware of it.
Okay.
And I have asked several times. So I would be grateful if you could just say that my councillors are not aware of the meeting.
Okay.
Do we have any other thoughts or comments on that action chapter while we're here? Thank you for pointing that one out, Councillor Richie.
The 4th of March, the meeting.
Yes.
We're going to have Dan, so who will be instead of Dan?
Well, this is a very interesting question, in fact. This is a very interesting question because we had an email the other week where they are not,
Yes.
can I say this out loud? They're not,
Are we still recording?
so it isn't clear, the short answer is it isn't clear who that will be, but we have had from Maxine a list of which of the sub-directorates will be reporting to which directorate going forward in the interim period following Dan's departure. So for the 4th of March, we have Brentford Rehousing Policies, Housing Complaints Report, Repairs, Sheltered Accommodation and Disabled Access Provision.
I was just going to say, can I just point out as well that the consultation working group will also report into this meeting.
Excellent, thank you very much.
And then just something else to note as well, because obviously it is a very busy agenda. The statutory guidance points out that you should probably have 2 to 3 items on each at each committee meeting.
Here we have 5.
Yeah.
So I was going to say we're going to have to be extremely disciplined to get through all of this.
I have to say, I think today worked well because we just had 2 big papers.
It did, didn't it?
But
I mean,
obviously we've got to cover the ground, so.
yeah, I think we do need to cover the ground. And I think we need to make sure that we are just as disciplined and succinct as we possibly can be, and keep our contributions to questions.
I don't see how, for example, sheltered accommodation, disabled access provision can be dealt with.
As a quickie.
As a quick one. No, I mean, these are all quite significant
And
items.
housing complaints as well, that's a big one.
And
repairs,
repairs.
Big one.
Mm.
And the sheltered accommodation has to stay on that agenda. It couldn't move to the next one.
Any of it could move to the next one, in theory. I'm concerned.
you reckon?
I'm concerned.
We might not be here.
We might not be here.
Yeah, none of us might be here, exactly. But do we feel that that's what we would like to do as a committee, to move that one
No, because I think, I mean, you know, we've
It's an
we've
important
had
one, they're all
complaints
important.
before, and repairs comes up a lot in TCC, but I don't think we've done shelter accommodation disabled for a very long
No,
time.
we haven't.
So the repairs was intended to respond to the 70-page document. I don't know if it is going to. The 70-page document that was put before the TCC. So that is picking up the repairs conference of 23 and the TCC report. The housing complaints report was due in January but got shifted because they didn't have access online to the historic information. That's meant to be essentially about what steps they've taken to address things. So the actual housing complaints report came to OSC. So it has been looked at. This is sort of improvements.
So are you saying that one could be moved? Actually,
Last page 61, it says draft homelessness and healthy living and temporary accommodation will be to be
confirmed yet.
yes. So can we know roughly when we get that I forgot.
So this isn't currently on an agenda. This is something which has been on.
Considered.
Yeah, it's to be considered, and it will be therefore, if it's not covered in our last meeting, it will move potentially to the next municipal year.
And I think the homeless strategy had been on earlier, but the department it's not ready because the cyber attack is not ready, so they asked for it to be shifted. So it's not. Yeah, I don't think it's available.
I mean, yes,
they said might do it for the next meeting.
No, but so are we moving anything?
Because of that policy.
Are we moving anything?
Yeah. So what
Are we going to move something?
yeah, this is what I'm getting from you guys. We seem to be minded to move something to the next potentially the next meeting.
I don't think there's going to be enough information on the sheltered accommodation. And it does need to have a discussion about whether something's independent, whether something's extra need, what is the definition now of sheltered accommodation? Is it because it's a warden? Is there a specification? Do you know what I mean? So there's quite a lot.
With that item, then potentially, if it's more about the information, about what it is, we could set up a briefing before the end of the municipal year for this committee on that subject outside of the committee meeting.
Which then could perhaps inform.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know whether, because I think we talked about this before, I think Jackie Hurd has got the minutes from the previous one that Julie Mills and myself were on, which identified, and that's where it came out really very clearly as to the change in categories and actually what those facilities now are supposed to provide. Because what I think is happening, for example, on Inkerman House, which is meant to be independent, you've now got 1/3 people who actually need additional care. So it's beginning to skew those.
So
categories.
yes, so we do all agree and acknowledge that this is an important topic. However, I think that Bella's suggestion is a very good one, that we have a briefing before the end of this municipal year. And then we put that as a potential option for whoever might be the new chair to decide on the work programme for the first meeting of the next municipal year. Are we all agreed?
Would that be an online briefing or in person?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking if we're going to have a pre-meet before on the Monday, could we with that?
Yeah, doesn't always work.
If it works in offices, etc. Yeah, in fact.
Excellent. We all agreed that then?
Yeah.
Yes.
Can I just say the day of scrutiny is next Monday, the 2nd of February.
What do you mean the day? It's the day of the.
It's a spotlight scrutiny in a day of the working group.
So it's on consultation and how to broaden and look at engagement. So to have Lloyd, Claire and myself are on it, but we're welcome being the session rules. I'll get Bella to circulate the agendas if you would like to.
What is it for?
So it's our consultation working group.
Of this.
Yeah.
And that's the report that will come into the March committee. But,
Okay.
so that's on the.
But yes, we can. Yeah.
Yeah, you're welcome to pop in if you'd like.
Okay.
For sessions. The focus is very much on engagement that's gone well and engagement that's gone poorly. So, and also to understand what comms we choose to use.
Thank you, Joanna. So I think that brings us to the end of the meeting. That gives this meeting of this committee. And I would like to thank everyone for your time, attendance, and attention this evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Jan.
Thank you so much.